Well, here we go. Well, welcome to our August 27th RAC meeting, and I want to go ahead and welcome everyone. And if everyone could, and most of you have it anyway, mute your line during the presentation, except when Amy tells you to unmute, because I think she's going to have a lot of questions and questions for the audience, and so we'll have our speaker. So before we get started with our speaker, I'm going to make a quick presentation, or not presentation, but a quick say about the Education Committee, which is our astronomy classes. So if you're new to the Raleigh Astronomy Club, we're going to try to start those up, and that will be over Zoom, and it'll be after Labor Day. And so Phyllis Lang is going to be starting those up, and I don't think she's here yet, but she may join after a while, and then at the end we're going to have our business meeting, and so we'll bring this up as well. So Phyllis can expand a little bit more on the Education Committee and the astronomy classes. So she's toying around with the idea of like a binoculars class or a telescope class, or and have them over Zoom, so that we don't have to worry too much about
she's joining right now.
I'm sorry?
She's joining right now.
I do.
Yeah.
I see her. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll give her a few seconds. Phyllis, I was going to bring up, or I am bringing up actually, the Education Committee, and I told everyone that really you're planning on starting classes over Zoom after Labor Day. Do you want to? Should she disappear?
No, she's here.
Oh, okay. There you are. Okay. Do you want to expand on that at all? We wanted to start this before our presentation, and then we're going to bring it up again after, during the business meeting as well. So
I can.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to work on my webcam. Lordy, I worked on it yesterday. It's been a mess.
Oh, okay.
As regards the classes,
Yes.
I am hoping that we will zoom out a little.
Oh, there we go. Yeah,
Yeah.
I was looking at your forehead. It's like that one joke on the the television show.
I was hoping that we would have enough people to comment tonight, but I'm thinking of resuming the classes starting after Labor Day with the binocular observing talk. And I was thinking of giving it over Zoom. I had initially thought of September the 11th, but now I'm thinking Saturday the 18th, because we have a RAC Hobbs on the 10th.
Oh, okay.
And so that's what I'm thinking. And I'm hoping to hear from some other potential speakers of what they might be willing to do, and also from members of the club regarding what they would like to learn about, because I know we have a lot of new members, and there have been a lot of questions flowing back and forth. And so it could be that we have some outdoor workshops to help hands-on. Or instead of indoor workshops, maybe we can do them over Zoom. So that's my thinking at the moment. And maybe after the talk, we can get some specifics from those who want to contribute or want to participate.
Okay. That sounds good. Okay. So did you have anything else?
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I don't want to interrupt you.
And if you want to drop a comment in the chat
yes,
of
that's true.
things that you might want to see, we'll capture those.
Perfect.
Yes, that's an idea. Okay. If you could drop it in the chat, that'll be great, because we'll be looking at that, and Phyllis will be looking at the chat to see if anything comes up with her classes, and of course we'll be looking at the chat as well for the topic as well. So with that said, we'll begin today's topic. I just want to let everybody know, even though We normally have a business meeting at the end, and we are going to have a business meeting after our speaker, Amy Sayle, gives her presentation. So I'm going to begin with that. So Amy Sayle is with the Morehead Planetarium and Science Center, and she, let me see, I had nice things written about her. She is a North Carolina statewide Star Party coordinator with the Morehead Planetarium, which is in Chapel Hill. And the Morehead Planetarium, in case people don't know, that's a really nice planetarium, and they are open. And from what she was saying before, sold out class, sold out presentations for the planetarium itself. So if you are if you're interested in the planetarium, then definitely you'll have to start early so that you can go ahead and get into it. So let's see, and that's what I have for that. So really, the title of today's talk is "Thou Shalt Not Speak Messier," interpreting astronomy at public skywatching events. So if you are at a skywatching event, she's going to give some hints and tips of, how to make things go a little smoothly. So take away, Amy.
All right, thanks, Anne. Okay, y'all are gonna have to tell me if the screen sharing works like it's supposed to. Do y'all see it?
Looks
I
good.
do.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. This is a photo taken by one of our local astronomers, Joe Pettit, back when we did skywatching events at Jordan Lake, which we did for many, many years, decades. And I want to recognize that, of course, you all are the experts on this. Many of you all have worked the telescopes at public skywatching events for many years. So I'm going to be expecting lots of active participation during this presentation. And for starters, if you got here early, you saw me put a message in the chat, which was to tell us what your favorite object is to see or to show to the public in a telescope and why. So I want you all to be thinking about that question because we are going to return to it. And first off, wake up out there if you're not fully paying attention, because there's going to be a quiz. And I'm going to ask you to type your answers into the chat. And by the way, if you don't know how to open up the chat, Alt-H. You do Alt-H, that will pop it up for you so you can see what everybody's writing. It doesn't fly by as quickly that way. Okay. And by the way, this is low stress. You're not being graded here. Okay, 3 seconds to study a picture. Okay, you're going to memorize it and be ready to list what you saw. All right, it's going to feel like it goes really fast. So ready, get set, go. Okay, so go ahead and type into the chat, what did you see? Type into the chat, what did you see? People are writing Ursa Major and Minor, Big and Little Dipper, outlined with main stars, Big Dipper, Little Dipper. Bears, an upside down bear and a right side up bear. Upside down bear, Ursa Major and Minor. Okay, and give you a few more moments. Anything else? All right, get ready. There's going to be another one. It's going to feel like it goes by fast. Okay, type into the chat. What did you see? Tell us everything you saw. Jodie Foster, 8 Dishes in the Moon. Contact, reference to the novel or the movie. Radio Dishes in the Moon, the Large Array, Moon Radio Telescopes, Socorro Radio Telescopes. The moon and a line of radio satellite array. Anything else? Give you a moment in case you didn't get a chance to type in yet. Okay, one final one. Get ready. Here it comes. All right, tell us in the chat. What did you see? Light pollution map, Earth at night. Light pollution, Earth at night. World light pollution map, light from Earth at night. Earth at night and light pollution. The world is flat. Missed it, was looking away. Hopefully, Rob, you got an idea of what it was based on what people are saying. All right, excellent. Thank you. Okay, now find a nice comfy spot. We're gonna have a few minutes of story time. Okay, and this story is gonna be one that some of you know, and if you know it already, I hope you enjoy hearing it again. It is a true story. It is a science story, and it illustrates how the sky is like a time machine. Okay, so we're gonna imagine right now that it is May 27th, late May. We are outside and the sky is just getting dark. The sun has set a little while ago. The stars are popping out. Brightest stars are popping out at evening twilight. And one of the first stars you're going to notice is very striking. It's Arcturus. It's orangish. It's very bright. And because it's likely to be one of the first stars you notice in late spring, early summer, it's still visible, by the way, in the current night sky. It always makes me think of that nursery rhyme, starlight, star bright, the first star I see tonight. I wish I may, I wish I might have the wish I wish tonight. So go ahead and just take a moment and make your wish on Arcturus, just silently, just make a wish. Okay, from now on, whenever you see this star, I hope you will think of this true story. Okay, this story illustrates how the sky is like a time machine, and we have to go a little bit back into the past just to tell it. And just to give a little bit of context, I think it's all adults that are watching, but just in case there's anybody younger, the story takes place in 1933. So we're talking about between the two world wars, Great Depression era. So long ago, the telegraph system was actually still in operation in 1933. And the city of Chicago on May 27th was about to host a really big event, a World's Fair. This was the second time Chicago had the honor of hosting a World's Fair. So on May 27th, 1933, thousands of people were gathered on the shores of Lake Michigan in the dark, awaiting for the big opening night ceremony where all the lights were going to be turned on. And this is how they turned on the lights. They aimed 4 telescopes in 4 different US states. None of these telescopes was in Chicago. They aimed them at Arcturus. Starlight from Arcturus was allowed to collect through the telescopes onto photocells. That was, newer technology in 1933. The photocells took light, turned it into a form of electrical energy that they then amplified and sent to Chicago via telegraph. That then resulted in a switch being flipped, which then activated the entire outdoor lighting system for the World's Fair. Starlight from Arcturus opened the 1933 World's Fair. Now, I promised you this story would tell you how the sky is like a time machine. So where does the time machine part come in? Well, it has to do with the distance of Arcturus. Astronomers believed that Arcturus was 40 light years away. And I know probably most of you know what a light year is, if not all of you, but let's just review it. A light year sounds like a unit of time, but it's really a unit of distance. 1 light year is the distance light travels in a year. So give that some thought. Is light something that moves slowly or quickly? Really fast, right? Fastest thing in the universe, 186,000 miles a second. So in 1 year, light covers pretty big distance, almost 6 trillion miles, about 10 trillion kilometers to do some rounding. So if Arcturus is 40 light years away, that means that starlight hitting Earth in 1933 and having all those effects, opening the World's Fair, that starlight came from so far away, it actually left the star 40 years earlier in 1893. And the significance of that year in Chicago history is it's the first time Chicago hosted a World's Fair. That's why they chose Arcturus for the big honor. Okay. So there is an epilogue to this story. There's an epilogue to all my stories. They picked the wrong star. Arcturus is not 40 light years away. It's actually 36.7 light years away. Whoops. And I'm curious, I don't know if I'll get this lucky, but and no lying, by the way, you have to tell the truth on this. But does anybody on this call happen to be either 36 or 37 years old. And if you are, either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Just say me, and then tell if it's 36 or 37.
I turned 37 on next Saturday.
Awesome. Is it Letitia? Is that how you say your name?
Yeah.
Letitia. Okay, Letitia, we're going to go with 37. So
Okay.
Arcturus is 37 light years away, which means that it is your birthday star. So when you go out and look at Arcturus tonight, if it's clear out there, and it will be up it'll not be in this location I'm showing you. I'm actually showing Chicago, May 27th, 1933, from Triangle area, late August, early evening. It's going to be a little bit more towards the west, but let's all go out tonight, look for Arcturus, make a wish on it, and know that you are wishing on Letitia's birthday star, that starlight is as old as she is, the starlight that you're seeing. So you are actually seeing that star as it looked around the time she was born. Is that 1984? Did I do the math right? Yes. Okay. So when you look at Arcturus tonight, you're seeing, in a very real sense, you have a time machine. You are looking at the year 1984. You're seeing Arcturus as it looked like when the light left it 37 years ago in 1984. The sky is a time machine. This is true of everything in the sky. Even Mars and Jupiter that look like they're having a little planetary pileups, totally violating social distancing there. Not really, of course. That they are light minutes away. So, even planets you see as they looked in the past. Okay, so that's the story of Arcturus. Now, I could have given you a star tour and showed you Arcturus, and I could have told you a lot of facts. I could have said what kind of star it is. I could have told you its right ascension and declination. I could have told you its temperature, absolute apparent magnitude. And maybe some of you all will be super interested in that. After all, you are astronomers, but the general public, not so much. They're probably not going to find that interesting or memorable or meaningful. But you tell them that the sky is a time machine and they're looking at 1984. You tell them that's the star that opened the 1933 Chicago World's Fair. That might be a little more interesting to them. Okay, so I want to tell you now how I got into being able to get to tell fun stories like this. I actually started out my career not as a science communicator or science educator, but as a researcher in a totally different field. I do not have an astrophysics background in that way. I was an epidemiologist, which I find that I no longer have to explain, funny thing, since March 2020, what that means. The only thing I still have to explain is that epidemiology is much broader than just the study of infectious disease. It's actually the study of the patterns and determinants of health outcomes of all kinds of health outcomes. So what I studied was reproductive health. And so I got to communicate to scientists as a scientist and publish in the scientific literature. And I actually got to work on what you can see are some pretty interesting topics made deadly boring by communicating about them to other scientists. And now what I get to do is I went from researching epi to teaching writing about epi to teaching science to the public. And now I get to write about way more fun things because I'm aiming at a totally different audience. And so I have a different purpose in my communication. And so here's some of the blog posts that we put out right at the beginning of the pandemic. And so this is where I work, as Anne mentioned, Morehead Planetarium and Science Center. We're a department of the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. We're located right in downtown, the very northern end of campus, right on Franklin Street in the heart of Chapel Hill. And I get to do a lot of things there, not just blog, but also get to actually work in the planetarium and give sky tours. I help coordinate our sky watching sessions, and shameless plug, we've got a couple coming up in October. I mentioned earlier there was one in September at House in the Horseshoe. That site has canceled because of COVID concerns, but we've got two planned for October. We'd love help if y'all are interested. They are both going to have limited capacity and required registration. So we're thinking about how to make that safe. And we've already done a successful one in August with limited capacity. And I also get to coordinate the North Carolina Statewide Star Party, which many of you all have helped with, because the Raleigh Astronomy Club has been absolutely crucial to supporting a number of sites in the Triangle area who have acted as hosts for the Statewide Star Party. So thank you for that. So what I'm going to talk about now, though, is something that I first learned before I worked full-time at Morehead. I learned about a particular way of communicating to the public called interpretation. And I learned it at this particular place. And if anybody recognizes this place, why don't you type it into chat? Anybody recognize it? It's a national park and it's in Utah. Seeing if you're still awake out there. And they have an annual astronomy festival. Yeah, that's it. Bryce Canyon. It's in southern Utah. Bryce Canyon National Park. They have, in my opinion, the best astronomy program of the entire National Park Service. They do an annual astronomy festival. The last 2 years have been a little weird because of COVID, but I volunteered with them every other year since 2006. And they just do a really nice job. 4 nights, 30, 40 telescopes a night. Thousands of people come. They do a bunch of evening programs and all sorts of hands-on stuff and telescopes during the day, at night, and so on. And Tyler Norgan is an astronomer and illustrator and astrophotographer in California who happened to be the keynote speaker the first year that I was there. So he's let me use this photograph in presentations. Okay, so I want to say something about when I talk about interpretation, since it's a word that's used in other ways, I just want to make clear what I'm not talking about. So I'm not talking about the kind of interpretation where you're translating from a foreign language. I'm not talking about interpretive dance or anything like that. I'm also not talking about information. When you're interpreting, you're not just delivering information. You're not just listing a bunch of facts or items. The way I heard it referred to disparagingly at Bryce Canyon was you don't want to give a wildflower walk in the sky, meaning you don't want to just say, yep, here's this, here's that, here's this, and there's like nothing to tie it together, no cohesive message or meaning to it. So if it's just information, it lacks meaning. And it can also look like you're just showing off what you know if you're just delivering information. Okay, so I think this Walt Whitman poem, some of you will be familiar with, kind of sums it up pretty well. So I'll read it in case anybody's having trouble looking at the screen. When I heard the learned astronomer, when the proofs, the figures were ranged in columns before me, when I was shown the charts and the diagrams to add, divide, and measure them, when I, sitting, heard the astronomer, where he lectured with much applause in the lecture room, how soon, unaccountable, I became tired and sick, till rising and gliding out, I wandered off by myself in the mystical, moist night air, and from time to time, looked up in perfect silence at the stars. All right. Okay, I'm gonna give you an example of the difference between information and interpretation. And I would argue that what you're trying to go for at a skywatching event is the latter, interpretation. So here's the information example, temperature of Venus. Here's how it's described in a textbook, Astronomy Today, that is aimed at being used in a formal education type of classroom. In 1956, radio observations of the planet were used to measure its thermal energy emission. The radiation emitted by the planet has a black body spectrum characteristic of a temperature near 730 K. Okay, here's another take on the temperature of Venus. This is from Terence Dickinson's book Night Watch, which is aimed at the public. Envision a planet where it's so hot that lead would be a convenient liquid to use in a thermometer. So wondering if y'all have any thoughts about that, the difference between those two. Feel free to unmute yourselves, by the way. I don't think there's that many of you.
Ouch, that's hot.
Ouch, yes. Hotter than your oven. All right, thanks, Mike.
It
Alrighty.
definitely helps you to remember what the how to describe how hot it is. I mean, because I don't think that maybe people are. I don't have a good firm grasp of what a Kelvin is. I know that it's a measure of temperature, but I don't know. And I know that it's very, very cold. If you say it's 1 Kelvin, it's super, super cold.
Yeah.
But other than that, I don't really have a good firm grasp of what that means. So yes, definitely the latter is more, you can apply it to everyday life.
Yeah, more meaningful. I think you just captured it right there. It's more meaningful to people. Lead is something they can understand more than Kelvin. And so I noticed that actually just a few days ago, I got word that the National Association for Interpretation just revised its definition of interpretation. And so the definition they're using now is a purposeful approach to communication that facilitates meaningful, relevant, and inclusive experiences that deepen understanding, broaden perspectives, and inspire engagement with the world around us. And then this is going to be my crash course, Interpretation 101, which is highly condensed and paraphrased using this particular book as a reference. So the idea is that when you're interpreting astronomy is that you are relating the subject that you're talking about to the lives of the visitors. You go beyond just providing information to revealing deeper meaning. You're provoking people to broaden their horizons. And then we'll talk more about this, but basically it can be really important to use story, like the Arcturus story that I told you, and to have a theme or a message. You're not just talking about a topic, but you're delivering some sort of take-home message. The sky is a time machine. Okay, so what is meaningful? This is gonna be stuff that makes you think or stuff that makes you feel. So intellectual connections are the stuff that make you think. I experienced so much, made my head spin. Emotional connections, the stuff that makes you feel, experienced whatever with all my heart. I think with night sky stuff, it's so easy to offer opportunities to find, to make both intellectual connections and emotional connections. We have an easy topic. Okay, so now we're gonna revisit some of those images I showed you earlier, but now I want you to think about meaning versus just the stuff that you saw. I want you to think about the larger meaning. So feel free to type into chat. You're also welcome to unmute yourself if you would like. What do you see? I'll just get you started, prime you a little bit. One thing I see is I see a way to find my way. So I can see the North Star, which means I can figure out my directions and I can use the sky as a compass. So navigation, that's what I see. What do you all see? Thinking about meanings, larger meanings.
Sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down.
You're looking at the bears flipped around.
Well, they're circumpolar. So you look at it in the spring and then you go back and you look at it in the fall, and now the little bear is going to be right side up and the big bear will be upside down. Not only is the sky a compass, it's also a calendar. And Anne, I think you were going to say something.
I was going to say, you know, the little bear has water that is pouring out of the dipper and into the big dipper, into the bigger bear. So this is as a meaningful for that. So
yeah.
So I'll just interject one culturally. So there was an old spiritual called "Follow the Drinking Gourd," and a lot of folks that were on the Underground Railroad during before the Civil War and during it followed the drinking gourd to find freedom. So culturally, you use that to identify with people who are who are looking for freedom and also may have that in the culture in their past.
So Doug, you're mentioning universal concepts like freedom and survival.
Right.
These are things people can relate to. Yeah. And then Jason also similarly sort of mentioned mythology and culture behind constellations, and Rob said patterns. I see patterns. And by the way, it's probably bothering some of you that this isn't quite arranged right. Like, that anyway, just I want to acknowledge that if you're trying to like star hop from Merak to Doobie to the North Star, you're like, wait, what's going on here? So like,
can I interject something real quick?
Please, yes.
Yeah,
Jim.
I'd say that I read something really recently in a column, and it must have been in maybe Sky and Telescope or the Reflector or something, where the author was talking about the North Star, which is sort of boring to amateur astronomers, right? Most of us don't spend a ton of time looking. You might look for the pup, but then then you sort of move on from Polaris, or you might, align your telescope, or collimate on Polaris. But the North Star really resonates with the public, right? This idea that the North Star, they had no idea where it was and which star it was, and they can always find it in the same place. Is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's great. Great point. Anything else? Okay, let's move on. So let's go to the next one. What do you see? So many of you all identified this as you're looking at part of the Very Large Array in Socorro, New Mexico, which featured in a novel by Carl Sagan called Contact that was later made into a movie with Jodie Foster. Tell us more.
Looking for extraterrestrial life. So trying to look for the bigger meaning, to look and see if anyone's trying to contact us. So that was how I would interpret it.
Desire for communication,
Yeah.
the ancient question we've always wondered, are we alone? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it's receiving information. We're looking for information from the stars. The stars are telling us something, and the way that they do that in a way that we can't see is through radio signals.
Yeah. So Rob wrote listening, Mike wrote a massive search, Jim pointed out it's lots of dishes acting like a bigger dish. Okay, let's do another one. Let's do the third one that we did. What do y'all see here? What's the meaning?
The meaning we can't see the sky because of the light.
Well, looking down at this, you can tell where the populations are, or at least the more advanced populations. Obviously, they would have the light. I'm sure there's lots of populations in Africa, but not so advanced that they would have lights. So, so you can see that. You can see where the human cultures or the human settlements are from this picture.
Yeah, and there's similar comments about that in the chat. This is really interesting. Phyllis said sadness, where people are concentrated. I need to move out west. Africa needs some more light bulbs. We can't see any borders. And then some of you are basically getting at, it also shows you something about where wealth is concentrated or not, or at least where the waste is. Okay. All righty, thank you. Okay, let's put it all together. Okay, a little bit of lingo here. So you've got your tangible. What I mean by that is just, what do you want your audience to care or learn about? So like North Star or light pollution or whatever object you're showing in a telescope, whether it's Saturn or the moon or Alberia or whatever. And then there's an intangible or universal concept. Those are the associated meanings that can be associated with that object that you're trying to tell people about, whether it's navigation or survival or cultural heritage or waste or beauty, death, deep time, that kind of thing. Okay. And then how do you put it all together? So you need to consider your audience. You would speak, of course, differently to a 6-year-old than you would a 60-year-old. How can you link that thing, that concept, that object you want to talk about to a universal concept that has meaning and is relevant to people? In a way that creates opportunities for emotional and intellectual connection. So in other words, what will you say? Is there like an analogy, a story, a demonstration, a quote, a picture that you can share, or a question you can pose? Okay, and then if you just want to boil it down to the simplest possible way to think about this, rather than just saying what the object is, does it have a story? Does it have some sort of story? And I do want to point out, yes, you're allowed to speak Messier. People do like to know the names of things, so don't hold back. You're allowed to tell them that the Ring Nebula is also known as M57. Just don't stop there. Maybe also say, hey, it's the future of our sun, and see if they're interested in hearing more. Okay, so let's practice. So take a moment, take a look at this object. I picked Saturday, November 6th, how the moon would look. I picked that date on purpose because last I heard, we're going to have a session. RAC will have a session at Dorothea Dix Park that night. So this is what the moon will look like, waxing crescent. And some of you will be showing it to people in your telescopes. And a couple of you have already said that you really like showing the moon to people. So what might you tell the public about the moon at a sky watching event? And feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to put something into chat. What might you tell people?
So
You know.
in the past, oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Okay. In the past, I've told people that the dark areas are called Maria, which means sea in Latin, and because they look kind of like water, but then had them look through the telescope and find a way to tell that they weren't water. And 8 times out of 10, people are like, there are craters in it, right? Or whatever it might be. And so just to talk a little about the history of the moon, but something we can talk about later, I always have trouble finding that line, right? Like, where's the line between too technical and too simplified? But I found that's worked fairly well for me with some people.
I love that you pose a question to them to help them figure it out for themselves. That's great. It helps surfers. Rob wrote that in the chat. Mike, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I would, almost put them in the place of imagine you're sitting right at the edge of a crater on that line between light and dark. You'd be sitting there watching the sunrise from the moon.
Ooh.
And looking back and seeing the night.
Cool. Okay, so helping people put themselves and imagining themselves. Okay, and Tony, I think, might be referring to lunar eclipses, maybe, about the moon passing into Earth's shadow in a lunar eclipse and being evidence that the Earth is round because that shadow is curved. Yeah, people definitely like hearing about that. Other things that you might tell the public about the moon? Anything else?
If the moon is just right, I mean, in this case it wouldn't be, but if you've got a good view of one of the Apollo landing sites, it's usually interesting to try and demonstrate the approximate area of where that lander is and where the flag is, but that it's so small that we just can't see it even with the best telescopes.
Yeah, definitely relating to Apollo history. Yeah. Okay.
I like to let people know that there's it's a place of cataclysm, but there's been a lot of even though we look at the mare, I think that's Mare Smithy. I think you actually on the upper right there, either that or Mare Crisium. But
Crisium.
Yeah, but the thing is that it's there because there was a violent impact that caused it to break open and lava to flow out like a big lava tsunami, and that it just kind of overran everything. And I find people like the sensationalism of it, Yeah, so I like.
Yeah, death and destruction is always
it's always fun. Yeah.
I think that's why our earthquakes, volcanoes, and tsunamis show does really well.
Yeah.
Basically starts out with 5 minutes of utter destruction, although weirdly enough, no humans seem to die. All right, so back to our original question. This is the question that I put into chat for those who showed up early. What's your favorite object to see in a telescope? How might you talk about it to the public? And it doesn't have to be your favorite object, just any object. And I'm wondering if you all have anything in mind, some interesting story that you like to tell about an object, or some way that you find that really captures people's imagination. And you can type in a chat or you can unmute.
Yeah, I'll jump in and I love showing off the Ring Nebula to folks. I particularly like to do it via EAA. So with the camera, you're seeing the live stream of it, but you're seeing it in color. Makes it a little more accessible to folks. But when you start to explain that, what you're seeing is the leftover atmosphere and what has been sloughed off from a star that has basically died. And again, this is our sun's future. And then just to point out that if you kind of go from one edge of the the barrier, or kind of the edge of the nebulosity to the other, that's basically 0.6 of a light year across, and yet it still seems so tiny and so small. And I used to know what the colors represented in terms of gas, and I usually try and brush up on that before an outreach event, but then start talking about what the colors to represent in terms of elements.
I usually enjoy, depending on the season and whatever we're doing, I usually enjoy trying to find an object that shows some color, maybe. And I always enjoy asking the younger kids whether they can see the color, because children generally can see better color than older people do. And then we'll talk about what is that color? How did it happen? Do you see any other colors? That type of thing. I love to hear from kids what they see, because they're so much more capable than someone like me. And this is usually with an 8-inch telescope. So, I wouldn't normally see color in a nebula through an 8-inch telescope, maybe through something larger. But it's always amazing to hear a kid say, oh, well, I can see blue or purple or whatever, because the person standing behind them may take a look and not see it. So we get to have a tiny bit of physiology of the eye and what is the chemistry of what you're seeing. So I'm hoping that child feels good about the fact they're seeing something others aren't, and that they can understand that color is real and it represents the reflection of light, or the absorption and re-emission of light, or something like that, that tells us something about the object we're looking at. It's amazing to ask kids what they see.
I love that, because then you also know that they're seeing, they're actually seeing something.
Yeah.
As well. And also I love how you change how you talk depending on who it is. So you talk to a kid differently from how you talk to an adult, because they have different needs and interests.
Oh yeah. With an adult, you can say, do you see any color? And usually hear no. So you move on to some other possible thing that someone like I might see, structure or dark spots or whatever. We all see different things.
I'd like to share something.
Yeah.
I'm pretty new to this, but I did help out at a recent stargazing event. It was a public event. Campers, a lot of kids, a lot of parents. And we had 3 telescopes there. 2 of them were, the GoPro type. And I don't know what they were doing, because I was so busy with all the kids around the manual Dobsonian telescope. I had a loaner from the club. And I had a lot of fun with Saturn, or should I say the kids had a lot of fun with Saturn, because the best I could do, because I didn't know anything about objects in the sky or how to find anything. I'm trying to figure that out myself. So I just I taught them how to use the telescope. And I said, take off with it. And you find something for us to talk about. And as the evening progressed, I kind of started to say, why don't you try to find that star up there? That's Saturn. And so they would struggle with the scope, and it'd kind of blurry, and then they'd slowly come in and they'd see those rings on the Saturn, and they were just wowed. So I was kind of wondering if there's something about I think it's the hands-on experience that I found that these kids would just get a hold of that telescope and they wouldn't let go. It really held their interest. And when they found Saturn, even parents, when they found Saturn on their own, it was pretty exciting.
I found out that if you teach kids to move a Dobsonian around, when they walk over to my go-to scope, they rip it right out of alignment.
Oops.
I think one of the things that Rob is saying, though, and Jim Presley has actually said it before. And that is that he did the same thing. He just saw a star in the sky when he was first getting into astronomy, and he pointed the telescope at it, and lo and behold, that was Saturn. And he was just completely floored by what he was able to do. And early successes that you actually make personally often guarantee the desire and the zest for more success. And so that's always a thing in astronomy is if you can encourage someone to actually have an early success, they're going to want to do it again, and then they're going to want to do it again and again and again. So I think it's a really great story you told there, Rob.
Yeah, I love that. We have so few skywatching events, or we have the luxury of getting to do that kind of. Usually, you have this long line.
Yeah.
But you're reminding me of one we did for a private group where it was just like at one point it was just me and this like 12-year-old girl, and I taught her how to use the telescope to find things, and it was great to see her confidence increasing. She didn't think she could do it at first, but then she could.
That's awesome.
All right.
Struck by the fact that people, the wow factor is so universal with looking at deep sky and stars and open, closed clusters. Everybody always seems to be wowed out the first time they see it. There's always this inhale of breath or this amazed reaction the first time they see something. And it seems to be universal. I've not seen many people that didn't have an emotional reaction to seeing something for the first time.
Yeah.
So fun to be part of that, facilitating that. Yeah. Okay, so you all are coming up. This is great. This is exactly what I was hoping, that you all would share your experiences. So I'm going to put some more fodder out there, and then you can argue with me, and you can just add your own tips. But here are some thoughts about interpreting at the telescope when you're at a public event. Number one, I would say you should make sure you're not spending 100% of your time with the person at the eyepiece. Now, if the person at your eyepiece is a really grabby 4-year-old, yeah, you need to, for that moment, spend all your time with that person. But you should also pay attention to your line. Probably my biggest pet peeve is when I go to an event and nobody seems to know what they're in line for, which means that nobody's telling them what they're in line for. So if you're operating a telescope, you can still talk to the line. And at Bryce Canyon, their rule at that time when they were training me was 70% of your time is talking to the line. I've been at other places, Great Basin National Park, where they spent 90% of the time talking to the line. They actually got the lines lined up really close together. This was in the before time, before people were worried about distancing. And that ranger got right in the middle with like a microphone and was talking about what the telescopes were looking at. And then and the person at the eyepiece got help from another volunteer if they needed it. But most of the interpretation was happening while the person was in line.
What you're talking about, Amy,
yeah,
it really focuses why we need volunteers at these outreach events, because we don't need a bunch of people with telescopes. We need people to walk around through the crowd and talk to them and help manage and help get people ready for what they're going to do. All those things you're talking about, we need volunteers for.
Yes, good plug. And if you are short-staffed, one thing you can do is you can kind of, if you have the space to do so, wrap your line kind of like in an oval almost. And then you can step just a few steps away from the eyepiece, and then you're speaking to the entire line. It's hard when they're all in a line straight out, because then the people at the end can't hear you. But anyway, so there's sometimes ways you can get around that, but absolutely, if you can have more people wandering around, and sometimes I'll do that at sky watching sessions. You'll see me come up to you and say, hey, what are we looking at right now? And then I'll run back and tell the 15 people back what they're in line for. Another thing that is great to do when you're able to is to ask people what their background and interests are. And the ways I usually do this is I say, have you looked through a telescope before, or what brought you out tonight? You can learn really interesting things really fast. And then just make sure you respond accordingly. I am still angry about did not happen in North Carolina. It was in another state, but I am still angry about the fact that I went to an observatory and the guy asked me where I was from, and we got in a conversation, and I told him I worked at a planetarium and coordinated sky watching sessions. And then he proceeded to speak to me as if I didn't know Saturn was a planet. And I'm still angry. Let's just put it that way. So it's really, really helpful to try to figure out, are you talking to an astrophysicist or are you talking to somebody who's not really clear that the Earth spins, or maybe they think the Earth is flat? And then you can talk to them accordingly. If you're trying to talk to a line of people, or you're talking to a person even just at the eyepiece, this 10%, this is not a hard and fast thing. I'm just saying, just present only part of what you know, partly because if you say everything you know, you have no room for anybody to ask any questions because you will not know the answer because you already told them everything you knew. And then you can also wait to see if they have questions, and then you can tell them a little bit more. So like, for example, if I had a line of 50 people who were going to see Jupiter, I might make sure the person at the eyepiece knows what they're doing. They're looking through the eyepiece, and then I run out a few feet and I say, hey, everybody, we're looking at Jupiter. Get ready. It's going to be awesome. And I run back and make sure the person at the eyepiece is okay. I go back out half a minute later. Hey, everybody, we're looking at Jupiter. You're going to see 4 of its moons. They're going to look like little dots strung out in a line. Then I go back, help the person with the eyepiece. Hey, everybody, we're looking at Jupiter. It's going to be really cool. There's 4 moons that you can see, but one of them's hiding in front of the planet right now. Come back in an hour and you'll see it right next to the planet, or whatever, so on. You get the idea. So the idea is keep what you say concise and compartmentalized, and then you can just keep adding stuff as you go. And then people who missed what you said before can still understand what you're saying. People who've been there the whole time don't get bored. They're learning something new, that kind of thing. So I'm talking here about like big sky watching events, which I know we're not really up for yet again, but I'm confident they will happen again. I'm confident again, we will get large numbers of people. And then don't be afraid to make your line do what you want them to do. If you need them to move because they're starting to cross paths with another line, make them move. They'll do what you say. And then we talked about this right at the beginning, right when we were getting started. There was a story about a cell phone light being turned on that probably wasn't very helpful. And this can be tricky to do in the moment, I grant you, when you're feeling irritated and somebody's like grabbing at your scope and smearing their thumb on it. But where possible, try to enforce your rules in a way where you're thinking from the point of view of how you can enhance their experience rather than finger wagging at them. So like, instead of don't touch the telescope, what we tried to do in August at our Perseus event at Little River is that we actually sent them information ahead of time because we had everybody's email address because we required everybody to register. And then we met every single person on the way in. Before we let them look through a telescope, we said, it's going to be really important that you not touch the telescope. So remember that you're looking with your eyes, not your hands. Parents, you should look before you let your 4-year-old look, because you'll be able to help them better if you've looked first. And if you're not sure where to look, ask the astronomer where the eyepiece is, so on and so forth. So prevention is everything with that. And then if they get up there and they grab, then you can say, well, you're going to want to let go. It'll make it easier to see, kind of thing. Okay, so here's my question for you. Somebody turns on a bright flashlight at your telescope. What can you say that's not going to feel like a giant finger wag?
I don't even remember what I said, Rob. Do you? She was right. I mean, she had it right in my face. But I remember being very nice about it, which is very different for me.
It's hard in the moment, I grant you. I have done plenty of turn it on.
I think I said something to the effect of we usually use less light and maybe some red lights if we can. But anyway, I don't know what you should say.
That's pretty good.
Well, I guess you could say because obviously they're gonna want their flashlight. And I have a big eye roll there, but at least say, please point your flashlights down to the ground, so that you're not pointing them into people's eyes, and and I guess destroying their night vision. And then if they misinterpret that, I guess you'll have to say it's not all vision.
You're not going to blind you.
Or I've even seen, someone, if you're prepared, with some red tape or balloon or something like that, you say, here, let me do this for you. Like you're, and then try to get them with the red light.
I have chased people down at skywatching sessions with cut up red balloons in my pocket and be like, hey, can I turn that into an astronomer's flashlight for you? And that usually gets a yeah.
Yeah, that would be great.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
That's a good idea. I've very rarely been to a skywatching session where you get any sort of dark adaptation at all, right? Yeah. So I think if you had some scopes set up, if you had the space, you could set up scopes, on dedicated sort of deep sky objects, maybe off, and that could be like a no light zone, and you could sort of advertise it or have the line watcher talking about how this is, we're looking at a nebula, so this is a no light zone over here, but you want to go shine the flashlight in your eye for the moon or planets, go for it. But so instead of trying to police it, be like, as you move over there, just realize this is a no light area. Again, not very rarely a problem at public sky watching.
It's such an unknown for everybody that you can see their face light up when you go, that's kind of messing up being able to see in the dark. And they're like, duh.
That training that we have to turn a light on every time it's remotely dark, that takes you have to sort of reset your brain to get over that.
And now everybody's got a light on their phone. Right. That's what's really frustrating. Yeah, this is why ideally you have a greeting table and that you're greeting every single person as they come on to the field, so you can cut that behavior. And the great thing is now that at Morehead, seems like we're moving towards required registration for skywatching, which we had never done before. But what I love about it is it gives you an opportunity to communicate with people before they come. And send them an email that says, hey, here are the rules. Wear your masks and no lights.
Make sure I'm going to say one thing is that I think maybe Mike and I were talking about this earlier today, that maybe we as astronomers have overreacted also a little bit to that. Now poor Dana, shining the light right in your face, man, I feel sorry for you. I know that was a shock, but I think that sometimes at star parties we are overly sensitive to red light and stuff like that, so I think also from our standpoint, there needs to be some understanding. It's certainly not that, again, someone shining a bright light right in your face is not a good thing, but I think that I definitely, we call them the light police. I think people have gotten way over sensitized to red light when it's not really that much of a deal. Especially when we have the public, we're there to engage the public. We need to have a little more grace and compassion for the public when they make mistakes and stuff like that. So,
I said she was trying to help.
Yeah, I know. And I think in that case, I think you acted really graciously. I do believe that. I know you. I know you did. I've been in other situations where other people, make all kinds of wincy faces and are really quite belligerent towards the crowd and everything. And that whenever you inject a negative vibe into the crowd and stuff like that, that actually causes that wonder, that desire to learn to diminish. And so I think it's something we always really need to be sensitive about and manage in a good way.
Doug, what you're telling me is that I can no longer kind of all of a sudden just drop to my knees, cover my eyes, and start rolling around the ground saying, my night vision.
Exactly.
Okay.
You can, but let me know before, if I'm there, let me know ahead of time before you do it, because I want to see it.
Take a video of it.
Yeah, exactly. Dana, we could take videos of Mike.
I love it. Rob, you were going to say something, I think?
Well, I was going to ask a question because I was thinking it would be nice when I go out to have a red light shining on my little table where I got my maps and books and stuff, and so I built this little thing, cardboard box, stuck my red light in there. And I was wondering, is that something that's okay to have at an event if there's other telescopes? can you have just a red light, shining downward on your little space so that you could just get to things quickly? Or in general, is the general rule, no lights as much as possible, red or white?
I'm going to have red light because I don't want them tripping over my telescope and stuff.
Now, Rob, I would definitely say it's red light is absolutely preferred. I've heard people talk about green light being better for night vision. That's a debate I don't know enough about to have. But most people will tell you keep it as dim as possible. So you don't want to flood your area, especially if kind of you're out and you're observing and you want to try and keep your dark adaptation as much as possible. So yeah, something that you can keep low so that's always pointing down but emits a little bit of red light is a good idea. And I'm just trying to get this to work, but I think I took the
direction
out.
that the light is coming from is really important. And
yes,
that's my first go-to, my emergency move when somebody lights up is to ask them to point it downward. That's the most polite thing you can do because you're not telling them to turn it off. You're just telling them to point it down. Then my next move is to tell them to use their hand as a diffuser. Most of the time, if you put your finger over your cell phone light, it really cuts down on the light, but it doesn't make it go out completely. And so diffusing the light, aiming it in a different direction and diffusing it. And the rule, I think the golden rule that we always talk about is use as little light as you can get away with. And that most astronomy textbooks are on bright white paper with black stars. And that makes it, with very little red light, it's fairly visible. You just have a little dim illumination over your table, and it's not enough to cause a problem.
Yep.
It's the old thing. The headlamps are the popular thing, and for some reason, people put headlights on and they let it point straight out, and it goes right into the other person's face. You want to turn it so it's pointed down right in front of you, so it's illuminating the ground 2 or 3 feet in front of your toes.
Yeah.
So, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, oh yeah, go ahead, show us, Mike, and then I'll move on to the final topic.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is just, it's a little plexiglass plate. So you can, it's optically clear and it's got lights on the edge. And when it's dark and you just kind of lay this on top of your maps, it illuminates the map perfectly without really having any light scattering anywhere at all. And it just so happens this is the exact perfect size for the, oh gosh, where is it? For the Pocket Sky Atlas. So
That's amazing, Mike. That's really cool.
It covers it perfectly. So it's
Nice.
a great way. I mean, it's called a light wedge. I don't know if they make it in red anymore, but again, something similar. I mean, you could come up with your own plexiglass and a little, few, it's actually only two LEDs, and that's it. Just 2 LED lights, bulbs, and that it makes enough to illuminate it, and you can see it no problem. It also helps keep the dew off of the paper.
Yes, it does.
Multifunctional.
One recommendation, don't let the batteries go bad in those things. It wrecks them.
I always take them out.
That would be wise.
I was fumbling trying to find the batteries and everything. Yeah, I never leave it in there.
Yeah,
just
don't
corrode.
do that.
Yeah.
All right, lots of great tips. Thank you.
So I have one more, Amy, and then I'll shut up.
Yes, go for it.
One of the things that we thought about ahead of time last outreach was these are going to be almost all kids. So I had the telescope all the way at the bottom. The legs were not extended at all. And I had brought a couple of boxes with me that like the rugged toolbox things, because I kept having moms pick their 4-year-old up to try and hold them at the eyepiece, which of course won't work, but the kid could stand there and do it. So it's just good things to think about ahead of time like that.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. These are good tips. We could have spent the entire time, I think, just on your all's tips. Thank you. Let me do one last thing, because I put it in the I need to open up the chat again, make sure I'm not missing anything here. I put it in the description. What if you get a question you don't know the answer to? How do you say, I don't know? And I'm going to tell you all, I borrowed these. These are modified only a little bit from the Night Sky Network. They have a really awesome 7-minute video that's aimed at how to say, I don't know at your telescope. So first rule, don't panic. Nobody knows everything. You cannot be expected to know everything. Second thing, don't make up an answer. It's better to give no answer than to give an incorrect one or a made up one. Share what you do know. You probably know some related information about whatever they asked about. Maybe you don't know exactly what the colors in the Ring Nebula mean, but you know something else related to the Ring Nebula. And you can suggest how they can find out more. You can say, hey, you should ask Doug over there. He knows about blah, blah, blah. Or, your favorite online source or library.
I'll make up an answer.
Doug will make up an answer for you. Here's a big one, actually. This comes up a lot for us, at least at the planetarium. Be sure you understand their question. So a lot of times people use language that's not very precise, or they're not using terms quite correctly, and it can lead you to misinterpret their question, or they just sort of ask it in a very mangled way. And don't be afraid to try to get somebody to ask the question in a different way, or there's things you can say that will help out. Like, I'm not sure I've heard about that. It sounds interesting. Can you say a little bit more? Or you can say something like, well, that's a fascinating topic. What prompted you to ask about it? So sometimes just asking somebody why they're asking about it can lead to them asking you sort of a related question that you can answer. And then this is the number one thing. And actually, this holds for all interpretation in a public skywatching event. Often, people just want to engage. They just want to make a connection. They ask questions sometimes just to have a conversation. They don't actually need to know. Their life will still be complete, even if they don't find out what the green color means or whatever. And your goal is just to leave them interested and excited and wanting to come back. Leave them feeling good. And this is something I learned from working the information desk at Bryce Canyon, is that I realized a lot of people would ask this question. They'd ask questions that were answered in the park newspaper. And I finally realized, oh, they want to talk to a ranger. That's what they want. They want to say that the ranger told them what hike to take. They don't want to get that from the park newspaper. Same thing with the planetarium. Sometimes people just want to ask you a question because they see you as an expert. If you're working at a telescope, they just want to engage with you. Okay, and then this is, I'll try to see if I can put this into the chat, the video link, but I want to end with a shameless, first the acknowledgements. These are some of the people that I learned principles of interpretive philosophy from: Kevin Poe, Angie Richmond, and Chad Moore. They all have slightly different jobs now, but they were all at Bryce Canyon at that time. And then also the Beck and Cable book. And then shameless plug, 10th annual statewide star party is coming up April 8th and April 9th. That is not 2002. That is a typo. 2022. Time has lost all meaning.
The
theme is it was not
Sky is a time machine.
Right, exactly. Sky's a time machine. The theme is understanding the universe, and specifically, the activities will be about science and engineering related to the James Webb Space Telescope, unless it blows up on the launch pad, in which case we'll just shrink it back to understanding the universe.
Actually, year 2002 was probably when it was supposed to launch. Oh,
yeah,
wait.
there we go.
It might have been. It was.
2007, I think, is the actual.
All right. Thanks, you all. I'm looking at the chat to see if there's anything that I missed here. Thank you for all your participation, by the way. Yeah, Disney World, turn the line into the experience. Yep. Oh, interesting. Phyllis is talking about going to an astronomy show, meeting people from the British Deaf Astronomers Association, and found a way to communicate and help each other. Cool.
It was cool. It really was neat.
Okay, so So a vote, I guess, since we had a really great talk.
Was
And,
anyone have any questions for Amy?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions? That's true.
Please feel free to ask. She's the expert.
Yeah. Amy, would it be possible to get a kind of electronic copy of those tips that you had in your slide deck?
I can send you the slides if you like.
Okay, perfect.
And I just wanted to say that, yeah, your point about people just wanting to have a conversation, usually that's it. There's only been one time that somebody really stumped me, and he was trying to, referring to some graduate study or something. I'm like, what? What does that mean? And then he spilled the beans, and I said, oh, I see.
Is it one of somebody wanted to show off how much they knew?
Yes, that's what it was.
Yes. Yeah, we get that at the planetarium a lot. I try to flush out those people before the show starts. I try to find the astrophysicist basically in the audience ahead of time. I know all the astrophysicists here are very generous and would never try to like stump me in the middle of a show, but there are a few.
The I don't know question is something that we face every year with astronomy days.
Yeah.
And we try to point out to everybody that you don't have to be an expert.
Right.
But if you've been to one or two, meetings, RAC meetings, you probably know more than most people walking through the museum for astronomy days. And that if you don't necessarily know, you know who to go to. So that was going to be my funny comment was, I don't know, but I know who does. And so that's I always, unfortunately, Phyllis and Jim Presley are my two go-tos for most anything I need, because I know they know.
Yeah.
But I think your point, Amy, about engaging the line instead of the quote unquote eyepiece, having the greeting tables, all that, and it's a way to engage. It's a way to engage on their level, and I agree. One of the kind of the worst things, or the things that I've never liked about outreach, are when the lines start to queue up, and you feel, as the person manning the scope, you feel hey, you want to get people going, but at the same time, you don't want someone to kind of miss out on an experience. I've had people where it's like, yeah, there's a long line brewing, and they'll just quickly come in, pop their eye in, and then leave. I'm like, did you even see the 4 moons of Jupiter? Did you, it's like the red spots there if you actually take the time to look at it. So
right.
Yeah, I think it's really important, if to do exactly that, engage the line a little bit more. It's not as, kind of, you can almost hear the people tapping their foot waiting in line. So, yeah.
Yeah, but you're engaging the line, so hopefully they're like, "Ooh, I just got a new tidbit." And then also, what I've learned from asking people what brought them out, a lot of them are they're not actually there. I hate to break this news, they're not actually there for the telescopes. They're there to make memories with the people. They want to do something novel and fun and interesting with the people they came with, and so you kind of can't go wrong, actually.
Right here is the best one we've ever had for interaction, hands down. We've had more interaction with, a lot of times everybody just sits and watches the presentation and listens quietly and then asks a few questions at the end. And this is the first one where through the entire presentation, people were engaged, and it makes a difference. It makes the meeting more energetic, and you feel like you've been a part of something.
Good. Trying to practice what I preach.
Yeah, you did. I think very well.
I have a question. What is there technology for to solve the Q problem? Couldn't you project what's coming through the scope up on a screen, or is the technology not as good as watching it through the screen?
Was that not a lead in for you, Mike?
Oh yeah, no. In fact,
there you go, dude.
Yeah, we the club has this little baby, It's a mini projector on its internal battery. It'll go for about 90 minutes. And yeah, we can project whatever we've got through our cameras. We've tested it and it actually does pretty darn good.
Project down onto the ground with a sheet.
Yeah, project down on the ground. I've tried a couple different ways. It has a really decent way of doing kind of the trapezoidal, movement. So yeah, I just put it rig it up high on a tripod and just put it down low. And I can't wait to do that with the next real sort of outreach event we have. And especially if the moon's there, and present the moon and have the kids come over and walk on the moon.
Yeah.
Oh, they'll like that.
Yes, they will. Yes, they will.
Okay.
I mean, there used to be a fundamental thing in the club, and this was years ago when I first joined, was that people made a big distinction between seeing it with your eye versus looking at a TV screen. And there was this attitude that astrophotographers weren't really observers because they were photographing. They weren't looking and observing. But I think technology and light pollution and gobs of other things have pushed the hobby in the direction of what Mike does with EEA, which, using electronics to assist with your visual. So it's a lot more popular now to look at a screen or look at a picture as opposed to actually putting your eye. And you certainly can see more than what your eye sees.
Can you still look through the telescope while you're projecting at the same time? No.
No. I
No.
don't think so.
I mean, most cameras are set what they call prime focus, meaning that the light that comes through the telescope lands directly. You can have like either pick off prisms, or you can have two-way mirror where you can flip and look through an eyepiece and then flip back to the camera. But as a general rule, you can't do both at the same time.
Which leads to the point where I don't see that EAA is the end-all solution to outreach, because I do think that there's something about having that tangible interaction and saying, that photon that you saw from this galaxy, that was yours. No one else got that photon. No one else saw it. That was your personal interaction with that object. But
it's unique too.
You can do both.
Right. You look through with your eyepiece and you say, "Ooh, look at that." Okay, come over here and look at what the camera can see. And now suddenly they're like, "Oh, wow, look at all that." So, it's amazing what happens when you can show the difference between the two.
Yep.
Okay. So are there any other questions before we get into the business meeting?